Magandang gabi. Magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. At ako'y nagpapasalamat na kasama namin na naman kayo ngayong gabi. Ano po? Sa Grace and Truth for You, from my house to yours, from my heart to yours. Well, alam nyo, meron tayong nanonood pala mula sa India. Ngayon ko lang nakita yung ang text niya, no? From India. Meron din tayo from Timor-Leste. Oo. East Timor yan, no ha? East Timor. Okay. So maraming salamat po sapagkat kasama na naman namin kayo ngayong gabi. At katatapos naman po ng ating 121st celebration ng National Baptist Day, mga kaibigan. Ako nagpapasalamat sa victory ay binigay po sa atin ng Panginoon sa selebrasyong ito, no? Despite the fact na marami mga nangyari, maraming mga naging problema at talaga namang nais ng diablong may stress ang lingkod ninyo, ma-discourage ang lingkod ninyo, at sapagkat yung po mga nakapaligid sa akin na dapat ay gumagawa at talaga namang siyang katulong ko. Biglang nagwalaan sapagkat nag-quarantine po sila. Kinakailangan nila mag-quarantine. Pero napapasalamat ako, sabi ko nga sa aking post, sa aking Facebook, na pinahintulutan ng Panginoon ng diablo na gawin niya ang kanyang magagawa upang sabihin sa kanya, hindi ka magatagumpay. Hindi ka magatagumpay. Kaya't salamat po. At alam nyo, kanina, yung aking post kanina, 92,000 lang ang nakapanood, no? Meron pong pangalawa akong pinost, mga kaibigan. Sabi ko nga doon, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the ecclesia. Tama po yun, mga kaibigan. Ano po? Why? Sapagkat we had 109,000 na viewership. Sama natin nanood sa ating National Baptist Day, particularly po nung ako po ay nagpe-preach na ng mga alas 4 yata ng hapon. Yan, mga kaibigan. Kaya we praise the Lord for that. At hindi lang po yan 109,000 sapagkat alam nyo, doon po sa 135 na nag-Zoom, ang iba po dyan ay mga eklesiya. Grupo ho yan. In fact, ako'y tinawagan kanina ni Pastor Berchan at sinabi niya sa akin doon sa Marilao Bible Baptist Church na pinapastoran po ni Pastor Butcasia. They had more than 100 people in that one building alone. Kaya napapasalamat po ako, no? Mula po doon sa Norte, Pastor Proby Cadeleña, kasama po natin dyan, at doon yung mga pastor natin sa Osana Bible Baptist Church, Bacaray, Ilocos Norte. Tapos doon po naman kay Pastor Proy Medina sa Baguio City. Doon po naman kay Pastor Jojo Tuazon sa Kawayan, Isabela, MBBE. At kasama din po natin dito ang San Fernando, Pampanga. Mga kaibigan, San Fernando, Pampanga. Under Pastor Emerson Cruz. At pagkatapos po niyan sa Marilao. At meron din po tayong kasama sa Bicol Region kay Pastor Ross Orolfo na, marami rin po mga pastor doon, no? And they represented the Bicol Region, mga kaibigan. Kaya din po, kasama rin po natin dito ang Pastor Lowell Barte ng Bible Baptist Church sa Borongan, Samar. Kaya din po sa Tacloban City, MBBE. Kaya din po kay Pastor Jimbo Cortez sa Mapolo Bible Baptist Church. At kaya din po kay Pastor Anel Quezola ng Christian Bible Baptist Church ng Roa City. At gayon din po sa Cagayan de Oro City, Labasan Baptist Church under kay Pastor Di Berandales. At of course, Bible Baptist Church, Dipolog City, under po kay Pastor Joe Pianes. Meron po tayo doon po sa Zamboanga, Sibugay, mga kaibigan. Nagpapasalamat po tayo sa napakayaman na celebration po natin. Tayo po yung nagpapasalamat, mga kaibigan, kay dating Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano that grace our affair. At siya po ay nagbigay ng napakagandang speech po sa atin kanina. Gayon din po si Senator Bongo, gayon din po si Senator Cynthia Villar, Senator Wing Gatchalian, at ang Deputy Director General ng TESDA, former Congressman John Bertis, mga kaibigan. So, nakakatuwa po, nakaka-excite po, na makita, mga kaibigan, na nagiging united na po ang mga Baptist po ng Pilipinas. Hindi po ito yung ecumenical movement. Ano po? Hindi po ito yung one world church. Hindi po ito. Ito lamang ay pinagsasama-sama ng mga Baptist. Anong araw po? Nung araw, mga kaibigan, ang unang-unang Baptist po na nagpunta rito ay talagang walang inisip kundi i-evangelize ang buong bansa. Yun po ang inisip niya. Walang hidden agenda, walang personal agenda. Ang celebration po dyan ay upang makilala ng mga Pilipino ang ating Panginoon. Nakita niyo yung history ng panimula ng Baptist dito sa Pilipinas. No? Binanggit po yung history niyan sa pamamagitan po ng video. Dapat ipalabas po yan sa bawat eklesiya natin. Bigyan po ng kopya bawat mga pastor. Ipalabas po yan sa ating mga eklesiya para malaman po nila how rich our heritage is. Napakayaman po. How rich our heritage. What language is pastor? Yeah. Okay, let me speak in English. May Kong, no? I was just saying that we had a very, very fruitful, a very successful celebration of the National Baptist Day here in our country. And we praise the Lord for that. Now, I would like to talk about the vaccines again. Because we talked about the vaccines the last time, no? And I mentioned to you the write-up of one of the experts in the Philippines concerning this COVID-19 virus. All right? And his name is Dr. Edsel Salvana, who is an epidemiologist. And I ran down to you what he thought about the vaccines. Tonight, I am going to tell you, these are not my own words because I am not an expert on the vaccines. Neither am I an expert of the coronavirus. Okay? So, upon research, let me tell you about the research that I have made. And this is a write-up written in the New York Times. All right? So I'm now reading to you and talking to you about the vaccines in the New York Times. And this is what it says in the maybe the commentary page, Two companies say their vaccines are 95% effective. That's the title of the article. Two companies say their vaccines are 95% effective. What does that mean? So let's talk about that. Now you might assume that 95 out of every 100 people vaccinated will be protected from COVID-19 because it has 95% effectiveness or efficacy. But that is not how the math works. All right? This is according to Carl Zimmer, published in November 20, 2020, updated December 4, 2020. And he is saying this, like to listen very well. The front runners in the vaccine race seem to be working far better than anyone expected. Well, that's good news. That's good news, isn't it? Who are the front runners? Pfizer and BioNTech announced this week that their vaccine had an efficacy rate of 95%. Wow! Efficacy rate of 95%. That is the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, which is now available in America. Then Moderna, that is also available in the States, put the figure for its vaccine at 94.5%. Wow! That's big. Okay? Thank you. Watching from Florida. Now, in Russia, the makers of the Sputnik vaccine claim their efficacy rate was over 90%. Now, that's three. Number one, the Pfizer with 95% efficacy rate. Number two, the Moderna with 94.5 efficacy rate percent. Number three, the Sputnik vaccine with over 90% efficacy rate. According to Dr. Gregory Poland, a vaccine researcher at the Mayo Clinic, one of the more popular clinic in the world, and their expertise actually is heart disease. He said, these are game changers. We were all expecting 50 to 70%. Indeed, the Food and Drug Administration, of course in the States, has said it would consider granting emergency approval for vaccines that show just 50% efficacy. They will use it with 50% efficacy. Why? Well, because it's a global epidemic. It's affecting the whole world. Now what? It's now 97 million. 97 million already are affected by it. Besides those people who are healthy, but they're getting stressed out, they're getting paranoid, they're worrying about it, and they're getting depressed. And therefore, we're not only talking about the COVID-19 transmission and the COVID-19 infection, the COVID-19 positive transmission, but also we're talking about mental health. You see? And that is what this pandemic is actually doing now. Now, he says, from the headlines, you might well assume that these vaccines, which some people may receive in a matter of weeks, will protect 95 out of 100 people who get them. But that is not actually what the trials have shown. Ayan na. Please take note, that is not actually what the trials have shown. Okay? Exactly how the vaccines perform out in the real world will depend on a lot of factors we just don't have answers to yet. All right, look at that. I think that what Dr. Esther said, and I was talking about him, was correct. Either you believe the science of the media, or you believe true science. You make a choice. Are you going to believe what the media says about the vaccine? Or you're going to look into the true science of it. Make a research about it. All right? And it says right here, exactly how the vaccines perform out in the real world will depend on a lot of factors we just don't have answers to yet. Such as whether vaccinated people can get asymptomatic infections and how many people will get vaccinated. Here's what you need to know about the actual effectiveness of these vaccines. Okay now, all right. We're both learning here. I'm learning and you're learning. What do the companies mean when they say their vaccines are 95% effective? Ano ibig sabihin ng mga companies na yan? Pag sinasabi nila, 95% effective yung vaccines namin. Ha? Ito yan. This is the answer. The fundamental logic behind today's vaccine trials was worked out by statisticians over a century ago. Researchers vaccinate some people and give a placebo to others. They then wait for participants to get sick and look at how many of the illnesses came from each group. Okay? In the case of Pfizer, for example, the company recruited 43,661 volunteers and waited for 170 people to come down with symptoms of COVID-19 and then get a positive test. Out of this 170, 162 had received a placebo shot. Now, let me just ask, what is a placebo shot? Okay, let's talk about dictionary and find out. Okay, what's a placebo? Placebo is a usually pharmacologically inert preparation prescribed more for the mental relief of the patient than for its actual effect on a disorder. Mental relief than the actual effect. And then it says, an inert or innocuous substance used especially in controlled experiments testing the efficacy of another substance. Okay, that is what the placebo is. All right? Let's continue on. From these numbers, out of this 170, 162 had received a placebo shot and just 8 had received the real vaccine. From these numbers, Pfizer's researchers calculated the fraction of volunteers in its group who got sick. Both fractions were small, but the fraction of unvaccinated volunteers who got sick was much bigger than the fraction of vaccinated ones. The scientists then determined the relative difference between those two fractions. Scientists express a difference, that difference with the value they call efficacy. If there's no difference between the vaccine and the placebo groups, the efficacy is 0. If none of the sick people had been vaccinated, the efficacy is 100%. If none of the sick people had been vaccinated. A 95% efficacy is certainly compelling evidence that a vaccine works well. Of course. There's no question about that. For example, like if you had clinical trials with 100,000 people, and you have 200 of them that had an adverse effect to the vaccine, that would be what? 0.02%. Okay? So now let's make a bigger number. 1 million, for example. If comparing it with 100,000 with 200 of those that had adverse effect. then if 1 million will be vaccinated, then there will be 2,000 that will have adverse effect. If 10 million will be vaccinated, then we have 20,000 that will have adverse effect. So, will that be a good sign for us to take a vaccine? Well, I think so. You know, all vaccines have risk in it. All have risk. We take the risk. When we speak of a cure, we always take the risk. When we speak of prevention, we always take the risk. Okay? Now, it says here, a 95% efficacy is certainly compelling evidence that the vaccine works well. That's good. I'd go for it. But that number does not tell you what your chances are of becoming sick if you get vaccinated. That number, a 95% efficacy, does not tell you what your chances are of becoming sick if you get vaccinated. And on its own, it also does not say how well the vaccine will bring down COVID-19 across the United States. And that is what I've been comparing about when it comes to numbers. So, for example, like, if we will vaccinate 100 million people, okay, 200,000 of them out of 100 million people will what? Will get sick. Adverse effect. Question, is taking the vaccine worth the risk? Think about that for a while. Okay? Now, what's the difference between efficacy and effectiveness? All right, that's a good question. Efficacy and effectiveness are related to each other, but they are not the same thing. Wow. Wow. And vaccine experts say it is crucial not to mix them up. Don't mix up the efficacy and the effectiveness. All right? And what is that? What's different? Efficacy is just a measurement made during clinical trials. That's good. All right. Okay. You had 100,000 people that went into clinical trials. You have 200 people that got sick after they got vaccinated. That is what we term as efficacy. Effectiveness is how well the vaccine works out in the real world. That is what Dr. Naor Barziv, an epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And you've got to realize that Johns Hopkins Hospital is an expert to this virus. They are the ones tallying the data, actually. Okay? So this is what this doctor said. While efficacy is just a measurement made during a clinical trial. Okay? Effectiveness is how well the vaccine works out in the real world. And therefore, it does not mean that if there is a 95% efficacy, when you begin to measure it made during a clinical trial, that it would be effective in the real world on how the vaccine would work. Ngayon, naiintindihan natin unti-unti. No? And then it says, it is possible that the effectiveness of coronavirus vaccines will match their impressive efficacy in clinical trials. Well, of course. You have to go on clinical trial first before you actually go to the real world and vaccinate everybody. Diba? So, I heard in the Philippines there are now some doing some clinical trials without the approval of the FDA. Question is, pwede ba yun? Can a certain pharmaceutical company do a clinical trial in a country without the approval of the FDA? That's the question. Or they are allowed to do clinical trial in a country without the approval of the FDA, and afterwards, when they begin to have a 95% efficacy, then they would apply for approval of the FDA. But then, how would we know that in the clinical trials, only a very small fraction of the people will have adverse effect on the vaccine? Well, we also would like to answer some questions like, when can I return to normal life after being vaccinated? Or, if I've been vaccinated, do I still need to wear a mask? Many people say, yes, you have to. Will it hurt? Will the vaccine hurt? Well, of course, you have had anti-flu vaccine, you have had anti-pneumonia vaccine. It's just like being bitten by an ant. That's how painful it is. Of course, it depends on your threshold of pain. This is a very, 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 very appropriate question. What are the side effects? Will this vaccine change my genes? Will this vaccine change something medically in my body? Questions like that. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the States has a long history of following the effectiveness of vaccines after they are approved. The clinical trials run by Pfizer and other companies were specifically designed to see whether vaccines protect people from getting sick from COVID-19. If volunteers develop symptoms like a fever or a cough, they were then tested for the coronavirus. Look at that. But there's abundant evidence that people can get infected with the coronavirus without ever showing symptoms. True. Of course, we call that symptomatic, no? You're a carrier of the symptom, but you don't have any symptoms at all. And so it's possible that a number of people who get vaccinated in the clinical trials got infected too without even realizing it. Wow. If those cases indeed exist, none of them are reflected in the 95% efficacy rate. Op. That's all. Why? People who are asymptomatic can still spread the virus to others. That's correct. Now, please, take note, Take note. People who are asymptomatic can still spread the virus to others. Why? Well, because they're carriers. Some studies suggest that they produce fewer viruses, making them less of a threat than infected people who go on to develop symptoms. It is just like what a doctor friend told me, who is an expert epidemiologist, who said that I was saying, Doc, why is it that, some people get positive and they have mild symptoms, and others get positive and they have severe symptoms? He was saying, you know what, Congressman, that is with regards to the load of viruses. To a person who turned to be positive, but the symptoms are mild, means that he was only able to get a few viruses. But to a person that has severe symptoms, was able to get a load of viruses. That is how he explained it. That's why be careful. In Tagalog, we call it ibayong ingat. Be careful. Okay? Some studies suggest that they produce fewer viruses, making them less of a threat than infected people who go on to develop symptoms. But if people get vaccinated, and then stop wearing masks and taking other safety measures, their chances of spreading the coronavirus to others would increase. Ibig sabihin yan, when you get the vaccine, you get vaccinated, it's not automatic all of a sudden. You are not a carrier anymore. Or you will not get infected anymore. So it means this. Even if you get the vaccine, you still follow the guidelines and the protocols. Social distancing, wearing of masks, carrying alcohol, washing of the hands, and face shield. Dr. Barsif says, you could get this paradoxical situation of things getting worse. Now, can you imagine? You get vaccinated and you thought, well, I'm okay now. Nothing is wrong with me. And then you stop wearing your mask. And you begin to talk with someone who is a carrier. And all of a sudden, you got positive. Wow. You begin to wonder, walang kwenta yung vaccine. Walang kwenta yung vaccine. Well, the question is, if you get injected today, how many days will it take before the vaccine have an effect to a person? That he has that prevention. And because of that, he can be in the middle of the people that are all coronavirus positive, and that he will not in any way contract it. Oh, that's good, Ramil. You had your Pfizer vaccine done? That's good. Okay? No side effects? Good. Oh, of course, just a bit of tenderness on the site. That's okay. And still wearing mask? Okay. Clean hands? Okay. So just something? Okay. Do you know why? Because you do not know when it will take effect. And even if it takes effect, you should not still be sure that you will not get infected. So be careful. You've got to remember, one of the CEO of a company that produces vaccines said that to be able to produce a vaccine that be 100% effective, it will take years. 5 years at least. We're looking at the coronavirus thing, and we're trying to get a vaccine because, my goodness, we've got to have it now, and those vaccines are not even done in a 1-year research. This is. Question is, will these vaccines put a dent in the epidemic? Will it go down? Now, here's the answer. Here's the answer. Vaccines do not protect only the people who get them. Because they slow the spread of the virus. They can, over time, also drive down new infection rates and protect society as a whole. So, what does this mean? When it says that vaccines do not only protect the people who get them, but you also help in slowing down the spread of the virus. And over time, it will take effect. It will drive down new infection rates. And later on, it will protect society as a whole. Scientists call this broad form of effectiveness a vaccine's impact. The smallpox vaccine had the greatest impact of all, it says, driving the virus into oblivion in the 1970s, but even a vaccine with extremely high efficacy in clinical trials will have a small impact if only a few people end up getting it. Well, I remember having smallpox too. According to David Paultiel, a professor of the Yale School of Public Health, he said, vaccines do not save lives. Vaccination programs save lives. Ooh. Hard to understand, isn't it? On Thursday, Dr. Paultiel and his colleagues published a study in the journal Health Affairs in which they simulated the coming rollout of coronavirus vaccines. They modeled vaccines with efficacy rates ranging from high to low, but also considered how quickly and widely a vaccine could be distributed as the pandemic continues to rage. The results, Dr. Paultiel said, were heartbreaking. He and his colleagues found that when it comes to cutting down infections, hospitalizations, and deaths, a deployment mattered just as much as the efficacy. The study left Dr. Paultiel worried that the U.S. has not done enough to prepare for the massive distribution of the vaccine in the months to come. Time is really running out, he warned. Infrastructure is going to contribute at least so much, if not more, than the vaccine itself to the success of the program. It means this. If we're going to have the vaccine in the Philippines, you do not only vaccinate a few hundred people and then stop. We've got to have a vaccination program. Every LGU, city, province, and even the national government and the private business should now talk together and massively procure vaccine that can treat at least 10 million people at the outset. that is a vaccination program. But if our nation having 110 million people and you only vaccinate 1 million of them, it says here, vaccines don't save lives. Vaccination programs save lives. Well, it's 10:43, my friends, and it's time to go. It's time to sleep. It's time to say good night and see you again on Wednesday. I hope that I had a good talk tonight, and pasensya na po kayo. Kinakailangan ko mag-Ingles sapagkat nagtatanong na yung isa dyan na what is the language he is speaking? Kaya sana po ay narutunan nyo. Marami kayo narutunan. Marami ba kayo narutunan, mga kapatid, mga kaibigan, mga mahal sa buhay. Sana po marami, no? At nakita nyo po ang kinakailangan makita natin maigi. Siguro ulitin ko ngayong Merkules, maghahanap po tayo ng research tungkol sa mga iba't ibang klaseng vaccine o kaya naman, anong bang vaccine ang dapat mong kunin? Well, anyway, ito nakita natin. Nakita natin, dalawa, Pfizer and Moderna. AstraZeneca, medyo. Yung Sputnik, okay. Pero nakikita nyo, walang binanggit po ditong Chinese vaccine. Hello? 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 Diba? Okay. Anyway, mga kaibigan, maraming salamat po sa inyo. Thank you so much and thank you for your congratulations. All of you telling me that we had a very good celebration. Thank you so much for that. Siguro po ako'y makakatulog na mahimbing ngayong gabi because the Lord has blessed in a wonderful way. Hindi nagtagumpay ang diablo. Nagtagumpay ang ating Panginoon at ang aking pong panalangin ay wala nang magpositibo among us. Tapos na, tapos na, tapos na. And we will now go on to recovery. Amen and amen. Good evening to all of you. May the Lord bless you. You are watching and listening to the Grace and Truth for You, from my house to yours, from my heart to yours. Please share this with your friends. Please get them to come and also watch and listen. Have a good night. God bless you, each one.